Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Monday Night Live on Tuesday. I think this is the second time that we've done it on a Tuesday night. Due to circumstances last night, I wasn't able to log on and get to you at 7 o'clock last night, so I decided it would be easier to reschedule for this evening. So I'm here. I'm looking forward to tonight's session. And I'm going to give it a couple of minutes. Just let me know when you're here. So by hitting the like button or writing a comment or something like that, let me know when you're here so I know that we can get started. A big hello to everyone who was at the Foundation Clinic over the weekend at Glenray Grounds. We had an absolutely fab weekend. We had a little bit of weather on the Saturday morning, which allowed us to get our theory sessions all done. Hey, Michelle. Thanks for joining. And then it cleared up for us on Saturday afternoon, and then on Sunday we had an absolutely smashing day. So it was really, really beautiful day on Sunday. We had a great weekend. We got tons of stuff done, so I'm really excited about that. It was a fully booked course, so it was great to see everyone out there and doing the foundation stuff with their horses. And so this evening's talk, how to have a success or how to have a successful session even when your horse is hot and bothered. This was a little bit inspired by my friend Corinne, who's got a stallion who is fairly new to her. Hey Karen, thanks for joining. I'm really well, thank you. He's only been in with her for, I'm not 100% sure, maybe 3 weeks now, and we've been getting him settled in and getting him used to obviously new paddocks, and he's come from a really long distance away, so it was a really long journey for him on the truck and all that sort of stuff. So we've really been working hard on getting him settled and settling him in and all the rest of it. And so she decided the other day that it was time to ride him, or this was yesterday. And so when we were talking this morning or yesterday, and I said, oh, you know, Monday Night Live, she said, well, what about, you know, how he was yesterday? And hey, Fee, thanks for joining. How about we talk about the things that we did to sort of get him settled and getting comfortable with the ride? Because being a stallion, he had the day before experienced a little bit of you know, hormonal troubles. My horses are just on the other side of his paddock, and we had switched around our herd, so we had put a new gelding in with my mares and taken my horse Cooper out. And so what that had caused was a new gelding on the scene, or a new boy on the scene, had brought Galliano, my warm blood mare, into season. So Corinne's horse, the stallion, had to deal with not only a new boy being next door, but the girl being in season. And you know, he could see all that carrying on and all the rest of it. There is a separation, but obviously they can smell and see from great distances. So he was pretty bothered about that. And so the next day, Corinne said, you know, I want to ride him. And he was still hot and bothered, but we managed to get him to a point where we had a really successful session with him. A really positive first ride for her and him. It was their first ride together, and his first ride back after having so much time off with all of his, you know, being sold and transported and all that sort of stuff. So she suggested this topic, and I thought, yeah, it's actually a really good topic, because often you will go out to the paddock and the horse is, you know, a little bit excited, or maybe the weather's changed, or maybe it's a boy that is intrigued by mares, or maybe it's a mare that's intrigued by boys or whatever, and they can get a little hot and bothered, and we have to work through that. So today what we're going to talk about, or this evening what I'm going to talk about, is some of the techniques that I would use in order to make sure that I have a successful session with my horse, even when he may be escalated in that way, he may be excitable and things like that, because you know, I don't always want to walk away from my horse when he's like that, and sometimes that is a safe option. I'm not going to say that that's a negative option. Sometimes it is absolutely your and your horse's safety, and it's in your and your horse's best interest to evaluate your horse and think, you know, I'm not keen to get on that today. I'm going to go ahead and bypass today's session. And, you know, sometimes that's a really good option, but I'm going to share with you tonight some of the things that we were able to do to get them to have a successful session. And and sort of move past or get that milestone of having, you know, their first ride together and their first ride at this property and all the rest of it. So it was a pretty important big ride, and we really wanted to make sure that it set the groundwork, or it set the foundation for all the future rides. So the last thing you want is for something to go wrong on that very first ride on a new horse, or on your horse. Sometimes we forget that our horses don't like to experience these big scary events that happen. Often when I talk to people, if they've experienced a negativity in their ride, so they might say, oh, I got bucked off, or generally they say he bucked me off, or he did this and I fell off. So the blaming has begun for the horse already. And I've addressed that in different shows, but what we also fail to recognize is how the horse feels after an event like that, and that it can cause the horse some stress and some trauma to experience a rider, you know, falling off and maybe getting caught up a little bit, hitting them on the way down, and all of those kind of things. So it can be a very stressful thing for a horse to experience. It's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about starting young horses and the methods and the, I guess, the experiences that young horses have when they're first started, because I feel like it's such a vital piece of the puzzle. And if you have a young horse that is started in a way where they have mucked up, or they have played up and they have experienced a rider coming off, that can be a negative tone for the horse as well as that rider, obviously. So the first thing that I want to talk about in regards to having a successful session is our attitude when we walk out into the pen. So, you know, we get out there and we, you know, we notice that our horse is a little bit excited, or he's up, or maybe he's running up and down the fence line or whatever. And immediately we need to make a decision, or we need to make sure that we set our attitude up in the right way. So what I mean by that is, if you go into that session saying, you know, why are you being such an idiot, and you should calm down, and sort of rousing on him, or getting stressed yourself, you're meeting his elevation with your own elevation. So you're only going to end up in a clash. You're not ever going to be able to calm a horse down by getting aggressive, or trying to punish him for being up and anxious, or try and and not understand him or anything like that. If you sort of get aggressive, or get big, or get excitable in your own motions, then that's only going to add to the problems of the day. So I love this quote. It's your attitude determines your altitude, and I apply that to all of my interactions with horses, and it's especially pertinent to this. You know, if you've got a bad attitude when you go out there, if you're cranky, or you're annoyed, or you get nervous, or you get anxious when your horse is a little bit up, and you start treating him in a different way, then absolutely that is going to cause some problems in your interactions with him. So the first thing is to take a couple of minutes and think to yourself, okay, I need to maybe focus on my attitude, go in there, remain calm, remain confident, and remain in control of the situation, so my horse can feel that energy coming from me. Excuse me, sorry. So the second thing that we want to do when we head out into the paddock and we've got a horse that is a little bit bothered or a little bit excited is we want to reevaluate our plan for the day. I've spoken about it in a lot of Monday Night Lives, where I say that my plan is always variable. My plan is always able to be moved. And I think it's really important in this case scenario to make sure that my plan is movable, and I take a minute to reevaluate my plan. So if I go out there and my horse is all flighty and spooky and excitable, then maybe today's not a great day to try and introduce something new to the program. Maybe today's not a great day to introduce something that requires a lot of excitability on the horse's side of things, if the excitability that you're seeing in the paddock you feel is unmanageable by you. If you walk out there and your horse is cantering around the paddock and you think, well, that's awesome, today's a great day to do flying changes, then absolutely go out there, and if you think you can harness that energy and you think you can work it and use it to get you something like that requires a lot of high energy from the horse, then that's part of being able to reevaluate your plan as well, is maybe seeing it for what it is, an opportunity to use that energy and in a positive way. But often we're going to walk out there and maybe we'll have had a plan of, like I say, introducing something new. So we walk out there and we think, oh, I'm going to teach my horse XYZ today. And then he's sort of bouncing off the walls and all that kind of stuff. I need to be able to say, well, today's not a great day to introduce something new. Today's a great day to actually go over something that he knows and something that is going to be confidence building for him. And I guess I try and package all of my exercises that I know, or my skills, or my program, or my curriculum, or whatever you want to call it, all of your knowledge. I like to call it my toolbox, right? So all of my knowledge is in my toolbox, all of my exercises, everything I know to do with my horses. And so I go out there and I think to myself, okay, I'm going to go ahead and let's use lateral bend for an example, because most people do lateral bend. Most curriculums have lateral bend in there or some kind of bend. So let's say we're going to go out there and we say to ourselves, I'm going to do a lateral bend today because I know that he knows it really well and I know that he's going to get confidence from it. So on one hand, that is going to happen, or for some horses that is going to happen. 100%, your horses are going to go, oh, cool, we're doing lateral bend. This is going to give me confidence, or this gives me confidence, and he'll start to come down. The other thing that may happen, depending on the horse and depending on how elevated he is he might go, yeah, lateral bend, I got it. Yeah, lateral bend, got it. Yeah, lateral bend, got it. And so he's able to execute the maneuver without it having a physiological effect on his mind. So we need to then reach back into our toolbox and go, okay, let's pull something out a little bit more challenging. So let's use maybe we're going to go out there and do some leg yielding. And then if that's still something that he knows like the back of his hand, and he goes, yeah, leg yield, I can do that. You go, okay, well, let's pull out some half pass. Maybe that'll be a little bit more challenging for you. And you'll hit that spot of those skills. And like I say, my toolbox is so big, but all the tools inside my toolbox have varying degrees of challenge depending on my horse's level of education. So I can pull out the easy stuff, and then I can pull out the intermediate stuff, and then I can pull out the more challenging stuff, and then I can pull out the difficult stuff, and then I can pull out the advancing stuff, and then there's stuff that he doesn't even know yet, so the new stuff that I want to teach him. So if I start going through those things and going to teach him, and I use those things to hit the point on my horse where he starts to pay attention, because I've either tweaked his interest or I've presented something challenging enough for him that he needs to, really think about it. Then I've come into where I want to be, which is getting his mind back on me instead of getting his mind or keeping his mind in that escalated place, if that makes sense. So reevaluating my plan for the day and picking the topics or the skills or the exercises or whatever it is that you want to call it, using those things to help get his mind back to you. So reevaluate the day's plan. Leading on from reevaluating the plan, hello Holly, how you going? Reevaluating the plan leads me to always having the fundamental principle of you don't have to ride, okay? It is not a be-all and end-all, I must ride this horse to have a successful session. What I need to do is think to myself, is my horse in a state that is so escalated, or in a state that I haven't seen, or in a state that I have had a negative experience in before, or in a state where I don't feel comfortable or safe that I can get him out of that state from on his back, that I need to reevaluate my plan for the day and stick to a ground session or a liberty session, or maybe, like I said at the start of the video, leaving him in the paddock and doing something, tomorrow. There's lots of different levels or areas that you can come from, I guess, and ensure that both of you have a successful session. And I can't stress it enough, because the amount of people that I hear talk about, oh, don't let him win, don't let him win, you've got to ride him, and if you ride him, then he's, if you don't ride him, then he's won. Well, one, the horse doesn't actually know 100% of the time that you're there to ride, or that you're planning on riding. The horse doesn't know that you weren't already going to just do a lunging session. The horse doesn't know that you weren't going to put the saddle on and then just do some work on the ground, or etc, etc, etc. The list goes on. So I can't stress it enough, because so many people that I talk to after they have had accidents will tell me, I knew at the time that it wasn't the best idea for me to get on the horse, and I did it anyway. And then, bam, all hell broke loose, and now I'm talking to you about an accident that I've had, instead of talking to you about that day when I decided that I wasn't going to ride because my horse wasn't in a state to be listening or able to be ridden. So this brings me to, if I do, Michelle saying guilty. Hi Ruth, thanks for joining. Yeah, so absolutely. So many people, and I have been guilty as well. I have been guilty, but I have been fortunate. So I have been guilty of saying, oh no, it'll be right. I'm going to get on him. It'll be fine. And I've been very, very lucky that the situation hasn't got me to a point where I have been, severely hurt. So absolutely, I think we've all had those experiences. The next thing I want to talk about is carefully choosing the exercises that we're going to do while we're in this session. So whether you're on the ground or under saddle, what you want to do is try and choose exercises that are going to set you up for success. So we touched a little bit on, using the skills or using the tools in our toolbox to get your horse connected to us and get him thinking back on you. Now I want to talk about the logistics of, for example, I see it a lot at clinics, right? So people arrive at a clinic, the horse, the first thing we do at a clinic generally is go around the circle and everyone introduces themselves and introduces their horse, etc., etc. And this is the beginning of the day. It's, the horse has just got off the float, or the horse has been at the showground overnight, so he's been in a little yard, and the horse wants to move his feet, right? So the owner's standing there trying to get the horse to stand still, because that's the respectful thing to do. We're trying to run a clinic, and the horse is there prancing on his feet and saying, I need to move my feet, I've been locked up all night, or I'm in a new place and I need to look around, or this, that, and the other. So on my YouTube channel, you'll actually find a little video that just reminded me of arriving at a new place and the things that I do to help my horses calm down. And that's something that I would recommend, that even if you're going somewhere for a lesson or a clinic or something like that, follow those processes that are in that video, or use your own or use someone else's to get your horse used to the area. But I'm sort of, I'm going off path for a minute. So choosing the exercises. So if you recognize in your horse that he is saying to you, I need to move my feet, then don't turn the session into, today we're going to learn how to stand still, because you're going to be fighting a losing battle. Okay, so if you recognize in your horse that he needs to move his feet, I'm not saying avoid making or asking him to stop, but what I'm saying is don't ask him to stop for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 1 minute, or whatever his level of anxiety is that he has to move his feet. You can go ahead and say, stand. Okay, now we're going to go and do this. Stand. Okay, now we're going to go and do this. So you need to decide on the appropriateness of the task, I guess. The second thing that I want to talk about in regards to choosing the right task, by the same token, if you arrive at the paddock and the horse is spooky and flighty and things like that, maybe it's not the best day to go, and practice cantering circles, because canter will often, bring out that little bit of jump or little bit of kick out or little bit of whatever. And sometimes, one, it's not what we want. Most of the time it's not what we want. And two, sometimes we're not able to sit to it, okay? And that's what causes us to fall off or whatever. So I would want to find a balance in between recognizing that my horse wants to move his feet, and recognizing that today is not the best day for Canna in order to keep both of us safe. So in order to do that, then I'm going to go ahead and pick something in the middle. So maybe I'm going to do a few different transitions, or I'm going to do, you know, as long as I direct the energy of the horse. So instead of making him stand still, go ahead and ride a figure eight, and then ask him to stop in the middle and back up, and then walk on again and ride another figure eight, and so on and so forth. So carefully choose the exercises that you're going to do with your horse in order to set you both up for success. The physiology. I want to recognize and I want to talk about the physiology of our horses. So, pardon me, I just have to have a drink of water again. We have to understand the everyone's liking it. Are you liking my jam jar or whatever jar it is for my water glasses? We love using like, you know, stuff that we use in the house for our glassware and stuff. So the physiology that we have to be aware of is if my horse can put his head low, then that's going to help him lower his adrenaline. When his head's right up in the air, that's when his adrenal gland's going to be pumping the most. The higher the head, the more oxygen he starts sucking in, the more he's looking off into the distance. So if I can get his head lower, then I've got a good chance of him starting to allow that adrenaline to slow down and come down and drain out, if you like. The other thing that I want, and that's not to say to pull his head down or to tie his head down, because that won't work. If you tie his head down and he's actually fighting to get his head up, he'll actually panic worse. So I'm not saying tie his head down. I'm saying if you can encourage him to lower his head, that's going to have a physiological effect on his body. Another physiological effect on his body is if you can get him to bend through his body, then you've got a good chance of being able to start to get his mind and him starting to calm down. When you get him to bend, what happens is, or when he's not bent, so when he's really straight, what he's doing is he's rigid through his body and he's putting his head up and he's sucking in all the oxygen that we were talking about. So he's in pre-flight mode or he's in flight mode. So if we can kind of bend him a little bit and get him to roll those ribs and bend that head around, then we've got a good chance of him starting to lower that adrenaline. So when I'm talking about bending as well, I'm not talking about rubbernecking the horse and getting him bent right around so it's just his neck bend, and I'm not talking about a lateral bend that is the correct lateral bend that we would teach at a course or a clinic. Okay, so there's two different kinds of bends. One is a correct lateral bend that has a huge benefit to my horse in his body. It's like a yoga or a Pilates kind of move. It's got a consistency through his body. It's stretching him through the nuchal ligament and through the supraspinatus ligament through to the top of the tail. Okay, so that's a correct lateral bend that I'm doing when my horse is nice and calm and I'm trying to practice, you know, my nice bending work and all the rest of it. That's fine. But when my horse is off the Richter and he's looking over there and wanting to run over there and he's wanting to do undesirable behaviors and I'm struggling to communicate with him or get him to calm down, then the bend I'm talking about is getting a bend in his body. All right, so I'm not talking about standing there for half an hour and trying to get this beautiful correct bend. What I'm talking about is saying to the horse, hey, bend, pay attention to me. Hey, bend, pay attention to me. Okay, so two different kinds of bends. Before I get all these comments and emails and everyone shares this video and says, oh, she bends the horse and it's not correct. There's two different kinds of bend. One is a safety bend to get his mind. One is a true correct lateral bend that we use for body development and muscular development. So the other thing, the third physiological response that I'm going to talk about today is when the hind leg steps underneath and crosses in front of the outside hind leg. So his inside hind leg crosses over in front of his outside hind leg. That has a physiological response in the horse's body, and what it causes him to do is get into what we call thinking brain. So without going into that in too much depth, I'm going to try and incorporate, or I'm not going to try, I'm going to incorporate those 3 exercises or those 3 things into my training session with any horse that is worried or bothered. So when we were working with this stallion yesterday, when Corinne first got on him, he was he had his head up, he was looking into my paddock, he wanted to try and find my herd, or particularly Galliano, because she's in season. So he had his head kind of right up and he was really looking about. And so one of the first things I said was, okay, so take a little bend on the inside, so get him to soften and bend, and then go ahead and ask him to disengage his hindquarter, and then let him walk on again. So we kept his feet moving. We got him nice and bent, which would have helped her bend him if she needed to do a 1-rein stop if something went really western. And then we started disengaging his hindquarter, or what I like to call it, because again, it's not a true disengagement. We weren't actually asking him to disengage to a stop. What we were asking him to do was roll his hips under, or roll his inside leg underneath him. And as soon as he sort of bent and stepped underneath himself, what had happened is his head had come down, and he would calm down, and then she would say, okay, now you can walk on again. And then he'd walk on and go, okay, and then he'd come down and we'd bend him and disengage him again, and then he'd calm down again, and we go, okay. So every time we asked him to disengage and bend, he would get quieter. And so we would reward that quietness by allowing him to walk on. All right. So use your knowledge of the physiology of the horse to set him up for success in this training session. Psychology. So we've spoken about the physiology. We've spoken about the physical things that we can do with the horse to create a physiological response in him that will help him to calm down in that situation. The next thing I want to do is talking about setting him up for mental success. So let's talk about the psychology of it. The psychology that I want to talk about is particularly when we have a horse that is bothered or worried about going away from the herd, or worried that the herd's running around, or another horse, or whatever it is. We're not going to take that horse that's already anxious, that's already stressed, that's already bothered, and say, righto, well, you want to go back to the herd, so I'm going to take you further away from the herd, because you are going to escalate that situation. And, again, before I get a million comments and a million, people mailing me and saying, oh, I can't ride next to my herd all the time. What I'm going to say is that if you have a horse that has separation anxiety and that causes you an issue, then your issue is that the horse doesn't see you in a light that makes him think that he is safe going with you and being away with you. Okay, so you've got a leadership issue, or you've got a partnership issue. Basically, your horse is saying to you, when your horse's separation anxiety comes in, your horse is saying to you, I don't trust you enough to be over there with you, so I want to go back to the safety of the herd because I know that that's where I'm safe. Okay, so when that happens, and we can certainly build the trust and develop the horse's trust in us, and so that goes away. All right, I've done it with my own horses, and I experience it with my own horses on an irregular basis. So, for example, Cooper. When Cooper's on the road with me and we're traveling everywhere all the time, he's not a problem. I can take him anywhere. I can put him in boxes on his own. I can take other horses away from him, and he could not care less. He really could not give a damn. He's just had 7 months off. I've just put him in last Thursday, so he hasn't even been in for a week. He came to the foundation clinic with Squizzy, his paddock mate, over the weekend. So when I tried to take Squizzy away from him, he got stressed in the yard. When I took him away from Squizzy, he didn't get stressed because he was fine because he was with me. She got a little bit stressed, but she got over it a lot faster than he did, and she went off and ate grass. So Cooper's got enough confidence in me for me to take him away from her, but didn't have enough confidence in himself to be left alone in the yard, which eventually builds. I've experienced it. Like I say, I've been on the road with Cooper tons of times to know that, he'll settle in the yard when I take another horse away. It's generally not an issue, but because he's had 7 months off and he's had 7 months, he's seen me because I call in and I make sure that they're all okay, but I haven't been riding, we haven't been traveling together. I've been in the United States, I've been in New Zealand, I've been away, so he hasn't seen me a whole lot in the 7 months. We haven't been living in each other's pockets like we do when we're on the road, and so he's a little bit worried about, being left alone. He's not in that routine anymore. So the psychology is, if your horse is suffering from separation anxiety, then set yourself up that you can still have a successful session with him and teach him that the session can be successful instead of doing a whole session where he's just calling out back to his mate. And you're eventually going to take him back to his mate, and then the horse is going to think, oh, well, I carried on for an hour and she eventually put me back, so next time I'll carry on for an hour and a half. So what I do in that situation, if I am somewhere and my horses are bothered about being away from each other, I will just grab, for example, if I'm working with Cooper, I will just grab Squizzy on a halter and lead and tie her to the fence in the arena where I'm working, and she can stand tied up, and me and Cooper can have a workout, and then maybe I'll saddle her up and then he can get tied to the fence or whatever. You won't have to do it forever, but we're talking about setting yourself up for success with a horse that's already bothered. So if being away from the herd bothers him, then work him near the herd. It's also going to have the other side of doing that, which I don't like to do it on a deliberate action. I'm not going to say go and work him in the herd so he doesn't want to be with the herd, because his instinct is always going to be there that he wants to be with the herd. You can probably train him to understand that you're going to make life difficult and work him near the herd. But that's not what I'm trying to do. I've got a horse that's already bothered. I'm not going to take him to the herd and work him and work him and work him and work him and make him even more distressed. So I'm not talking about making him bothered in the herd. What I'm talking about is keeping you and him safe by saying, okay, mate, we're going to work here, maybe 10 meters or 15 or 20 or whatever his boundary is near the herd, so I can have a session with you where we've both remained safe, where we've both remained calm, and so next time I come and get you, you'll be like, oh, you know what? The last time we were together wasn't that bad. Maybe today you can take me 30 meters from the herd. Maybe tomorrow you can take me 35 meters from the herd. Okay, so it's about setting you up for success. It's not about making his life difficult because he wants to be near the herd. That's just herd instinct, right? That's just his herd instinct. So I'm just talking, Michelle is saying, your separation blog earlier in the year did wonders for Dakota and my partnership. We still practice some part of it every day, even if it's 5 minutes. After several months, I can now take her away from her herd with no worries at all. Perfect. So highly recommend that particular Monday Night Live episode. Oh, that's awesome, Michelle. I don't know whether you've written more because it's not showing up on my little screen. It only gives me so much. But that is great news. Thank you so much for sharing that with me. That's really cool to hear that you use those philosophies and that it worked for you and now you're able to take her away from her herd. That's a really big deal. So awesome. Congratulations. That's very exciting. Okay, the final thing that I want to talk about in tonight's Monday Night Live of having a successful session, even when your horse is hot and bothered, is quit while you're ahead. Okay, so even if you've got an hour and you plan to ride that horse for an hour or whatever the session was, don't do it. Okay, get your horse calm, confident, and quiet, and that is your key to say, great moment to end the session. What a good job. You're safe. I'm happy. You're happy. Let's leave it there. Today, now's a great time to finish because it is going to set us up for tomorrow. The reality is, the longer you stay on a horse that is bothered or that is hot or that is excitable or that is unpredictable or whatever, the longer, the higher your chance is of coming off that horse or having an incident. I'm not talking about stealing a ride, okay? I'm not talking about stealing a ride. Before I get comments about that, and I have to say it's pretty funny. I'm having a bit of a laugh about it because I've started getting a couple of trolls here and there on the videos that'll come on and they'll send me a message or they'll make a comment where we've shared it in a group about something that I've said, and I think it's really funny. I always say to Hannah, when we read them and things like that, I always go, oh, I must be getting pretty famous. You know, I'm getting trolls now, so it's pretty exciting. So yeah, I'm not talking about jumping on and stealing a little ride and getting off while he's still excitable. What I'm talking about is getting on, getting him where he's nice and quiet. So this is exactly what we did with Corinne and her boy yesterday. You know, we had a really nice session. We did everything that we spoke about in tonight's Monday Night Live. We rolled his hips. We did a few transitions to just keep him coming back to Corinne all the time. Our attitude about the transitions as well, let me just clarify on keeping him busy or doing exercises. Your attitude is, hey, why don't we try this? Hey, why don't we try this? Hey, let's do this. So he's always thinking and coming back to you instead of saying, do this, now do this, now do this. You're not trying to catch him out. Okay, if you do things in a way that's trying to catch him out or that's demanding that he give you his attention, you're going to add to the stress levels in the horse. Whereas if you say, hey, let's do our hindquarter yield. And I'm not saying they can't be close together. You know, yesterday we were doing transitions maybe every 5 to 7 meters, but they were calm, confident, quiet transitions. And so they eventually, that horse, and it didn't take very long. You know, when I say eventually, I think I was only there for 20 minutes or something like that. It wasn't a very big session, but he got to the point where he was nice and quiet. So we hadn't, you know, cantered him around for an hour and a half and got him physically tired. We hadn't even got him mentally tired yet. But what we had was an interested, happy horse that was like, oh, I've arrived. I'm in the office. And we said, good boy, that's where we want you to be. How about you go back to the paddock now? And he went, oh, wow, that was easy. So his experience for that first, such a vital ride, which every ride is vital, obviously. And we have to think that every ride is setting the foundation for the next ride. So if you can leave your horse in a place where he feels good about himself, he's not so exhausted, he's not mentally exhausted, he's not physically exhausted, then next time you go out there, he's going to say, you know what, this seemed pretty simple for me yesterday. So I'm going to go ahead and listen and see what she wants. And we're, you know, hopefully the session will go the same way as it did yesterday. So quit while you're ahead, leave it somewhere successful and set yourself up for success with your horse. All right. I hope that tonight's episode has given you some good tips and some good ways to set yourself up for success when you've got a hot and bothered horse. I know that here in Australia, we're coming into where it's heating up. We're in spring at the moment, so everyone's got a bit of a spring in their step. Everyone's a little bit excitable here and there. We've got really lovely grass starting to come through. We've had some big rains and things like that. So, well, in my part of the country, it's a pretty big country, but we have, especially on the East Coast and sort of inland from the East Coast, we've had quite a few rains and there's a bit of pit coming through. So absolutely the horses are a little bit, maybe a little bit fresher. It's heating up, so they're not using all that energy to stay warm as they do in winter. And we've got all those physiological changes happening in the horse. And obviously they're all set for breeding. You know, it's our breeding season. Even if your gelding is gelded, even if your horse is gelded, then, you know, he still has instincts and hormones and things like that to deal with. So I am going to, as we're coming into summer, I am actually going to change the time of our Monday Night Live. We're going to start doing it at 8 p.m. That is New South Wales time. It will be 7 p.m. in Queensland. It's 8 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. The reason for that is because now that we here in New South Wales particularly, we're in daylight savings and it is it's just gotten dark outside now. So I know a lot of our horse people, obviously you guys, a lot of our audience is still pretty much going to be out working the horses. And I know I was until about 10 to 7. And then I thought, oh no, I need to run inside and get ready for this Monday Night Live. So we are going to absolutely, Michelle's saying it's 10 p.m. in New Zealand. So I'm sorry if that's a little bit late for you guys. It will always be up on the replay. I love having you live, so if you can join me, but I know it's a school night. So I do apologise to New Zealand for putting it on that late. But as I said, in New South Wales here and certainly in Queensland, I know right up until those times, we're going to be outside playing with our horses because we still have some beautiful light to work with. And the name of the game is to spend as much time with them as we possibly can. So thank you once again for joining me. Hello to all of you who is going to be joining me this weekend in Bellingen for our Liberty Clinic, which is fully booked. And I look forward to seeing you all. And Michelle's saying she'll be awake. That's good. I'm glad. I'm looking forward to seeing you all around the traps. We've got a massive calendar planned for 2018. We're doing that at the moment. So if you want to see me, New Zealand, I'm actually going to be there in March. We've already secured dates for New Zealand in March next year. I've got some clinics happening, and February I go head back to the United States. So massive calendar for 2018. If you want to see me in your area, please don't hesitate to send a message and we'll see if we can work it out. We might already be coming and we can let you know when we're going to be there. So good night, have fun with your horses, and if you would like to see me cover any Monday Night Live topic or any topic on Monday Night Live, please let me know and I will get it on the schedule. Good night.